Providence Council President Rachel Miller joins us. President, thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
The general of this story on rent stabilization is pretty well understood right now. As it stands, the council has passed the proposal. In essence, it would cap rent at 4%, save for a large volume of carve-outs. Mayor Smiley promised to vetoed this. It's a 9-6 vote, meaning that the council doesn't have veto overrides. What work have you been doing to try to build support for what your position is on this issue? Yes, on the rent stabilization package from those counselors that voted no.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it is just making sure that folks have a chance to answer any outstanding questions and to hear from both me and their constituents about how important this is. I mean, I think the thing that has really struck me as a counselor, I hear from people on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, about affordability issues. Um, the stories that have come to me as we've been in this debate, since the beginning of the year, since there's been a policy in front of us, are next level, right? So hearing from people who repeatedly have gone from apartment to apartment and every renewal has been priced out of their reach. Hearing from people who renewals do become eviction notices. It's overwhelming. It's a huge prevalent problem in our city. And there's a path, right? There's a path to do it, to support residents, to protect residents, that we could take right now. And I'm hoping that the counselors hear that message.
Yeah. So do you sense that from any of the nay counselors, there's any likelihood that in anything close to what has been proposed right now, anybody's going to flip? And to that end, do you think that there's any chance that the mayor flips on this?
I think there's always a chance, right? So I think the mayor has made his opinion clear, and isn't interested in talking about it. I think there's always a chance, for my colleagues to reconsider and to, again, as I was saying, learn more about, how this issue is impacting their constituents.
What do you think is the missing piece right now in terms of connecting the dots of what seems to be a pretty big information gap? I'll give you an example. We oftentimes hear people talk about this as rent control, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of leading conversation about the nature of or what carve-outs actually even are. In other words, this is a nuanced issue. So on the communications level, how do you communicate to the city and really the state, because there are so many actors in this conversation that don't live or work in the state, live or work in Providence, but are having an impact, no doubt, on the influence here? How do you communicate the urgency of the moment and the practicality of some of their concerns in a way that you could actually get to a compromise?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, because this issue is so widely felt, but also because it mobilizes a core opposition that's going to be opposed no matter what, right? Like it mobilizes the forces that have been profiting from a very volatile rental market. So we're talking about large corporate landlords, some of whom have big policy networks that extend well beyond Rhode Island. That throws a message into the conversation about that represents a lot of myth, a lot of mistruth. And that gets echoed by everyone. It creates a climate of fear. So that's been a huge issue. That's something that we've been working with since the beginning. It's also, it's why we've had so many community meetings about this ordinance. Even at public hearings, I've made a point of, at the end of a public hearing, just offering, when I heard things that were said that were not correct, just offering like, that's a good point. And also this ordinance does not do that. It's a huge issue, but it's important to keep it in its place, right? Like those mistruths are being funneled by corporate interests that have a stake in this climate changing. And it's a unfortunate truth, and maybe it's the truth of 2026 and working in a policy environment in 2026. But yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, there's no doubt that that's an element that is so important to understand, that there are outsized influences here at the end of the day. And I would say that you could make the same argument that no doubt those who have who are in favor of rent controls, plural, stabilization, also have networks that extend beyond Providence that are involved in messaging. The question is, at what point does this become simply a matter of survival for the city as currently constituted, where any expertise other than the individual experiencing it is irrelevant? Do you think we're there yet? Because it seems like Providence is right on the verge of becoming a ghost city.
The
President, I'm sorry, you're
people,
muted there. Yep.
I was just saying, I think we've been there for quite some time. When I look at the way that my neighborhood has changed over the last 23 years that I've lived there, it's remarkable. But over the last 5 years, since right around COVID and forward, long-term residents have moved out. They've been priced out. Long-term renters have been priced out. People who work in our city can't afford to live here anymore. And so you know, you're right that we're at this like balancing point of, are we going to act together to protect the people who live in our city now? Or are we going to kind of let things go, and become a bedroom community for folks who work in Boston or work from home? I think that we can absolutely preserve Providence, for the people who live here while still growing, right? Like that has always been, my position. Part of what took so long for us to get in this term to get to rent stabilization was partially because of just researching a solid policy that makes sense for the city, but also because we had other work to do, like other work to do on the housing issue, to make sure that we had everything in motion in terms of creating more supply, in terms of protecting existing stock, such that we could then do the move to protect renters, in the most realistic and possible way. So yeah, I do think it's an emergency. I think it has been for a few years now.
Yeah. And as you said, in league, these pieces functionally could serve a an immediate and a long-term solution to what is just, look, I think actually someone who said it really well on Bartholomew Town recently was Ken Block, independent candidate for governor. And he really, I thought, was honest about this issue, which is it's a global issue. It's a national issue. How in the world can we realistically put forth, whether it's white papers or press conferences, and say, we're going to solve housing in Rhode Island like in the next year? It's just not going to happen. So what does that mean? You have to adapt to the moment. And that means doing uncomfortable things. That may include implementing rent stabilization, even if it does thwart some of the optimistic views of what the development prospects are for the city. That to me seems to be the argument that the council is making. Yeah, even if this is imperfect, it doesn't matter. The ship is sinking. Does it have that kind of urgency in your mind?
It absolutely does. And it has that kind of urgency in the minds of everyone who has reached me about it. This is the first time the city council has had more than one or two renters. I think you see that in the policies that are coming out. Overwhelmingly, people who supported the ordinance are renters themselves. Of course they are. Overwhelmingly, people who came out against it are not. Right. And so, like, the degree to which we are talking about the survival of communities in the city of Providence versus unfounded concerns about impact both, on the construction landscape, which I think we've had some convincing data from places that have had rent regulation policies in place for many, many decades. That the case is, there's not a correlation between regulation policies and the construction environment. Same thing is true in like large, when you look at a large time scale property values, we're not seeing a correlation. And so, things become, are you afraid to do a thing that is a big thing, right? That threatens well-funded, moneyed corporate interests because it is new, and doing new things is hard in any environment, right? Like it is hard to you know propose an entirely new policy, and it's hard for people not to feel some apprehension about how that works. At the same time, that fear is not a reason for inaction, right? And it shouldn't be, and we should ask more from our leaders.
Do you think there has ever been, because look, I think back to moderating the debates for mayor of Providence now nearly 4 years ago when this issue came up, and it was a non-starter for the mayor. it wasn't something, it was a very clear issue that he just fundamentally did not believe in, and nor would he sign anything ordinance-wise that pertained to rent control, rent stabilization practices, anything that required or enforced a cap. And here we are now, no surprise that the mayor has retained that position. Did you ever, as president, really think that there was a chance that this could get through in a veto-proof manner? Or is this more of a, hey, let's sort of build a roadmap to different viewpoints in the city, and perhaps this can play out in the political lane, in the mayor's race, perhaps this can play out in various council races, as if to say to the city, make a choice about which direction you want to go?
Yeah, I think I think it's a both and. So my hope was always that we would get to 10, that this would become relief for people who live in this city today now. That it, like I said, it's already past time. One of the primary disappointments of this debate has been, folks who are just opposed to the idea of regulating rent have not come to sit and talk about the ordinance. Almost, I can think of one developer in my neighborhood who we had a very productive conversation about it. The invitation has been there to actually talk about it. And, even in opposition, there's ways to make policies stronger and better. That hasn't happened. And so, from the mayor's kind of just point blank, absolutely not, to other people who have a stake in this not wanting to engage the discussion, I think that's a bad thing for the people who live here, right? Like, I think that when big ideas happen, the opportunity is to discuss them and figure out how to make them work, not to just point blank shut them down. Um, you know, Influencing the debate is great. It does not deliver for people right away. And so looking for an immediate way for renters to feel some relief was critical for me. Um, I think, uh, in the climate of a veto, I think we lose track of the fact that the Providence City Council overwhelmingly passed, right? Nine out of six, passed a rent regulation policy for the city of Providence. That's remarkable, right? That's not nothing. And so, yes, of course, it'll be a part of upcoming elections. Of course, it's going to be something that we all have to answer to our constituents, no matter what. But my goal was passage, and I'm still living in that goal.
And we will see if any of I should say, nay councilors do flip their position. It doesn't seem as much. My reporting, I can say that I have no indication that that is going to happen. You as council president would probably have an indicator better than most. We thank you for your time today, Providence Council President Rachel Miller, here on Bartholomew Town.
Follow me on Instagram at Bill Bartholomew.